Putting into Starbase 11 for repairs after an ion storm damaged the Enterprise and resulted in the loss of a crewman, Kirk is shocked to find out that his official report of the incident conflicts with the Enterprise's computer records of the same event. Kirk says he did everything he was supposed to do to prevent the death of Records Officer Ben Finney, but the computer records tell a different story. Kirk is charged with culpable negligence in Finney's death, and Kirk's reputation, career, maybe even his very freedom, rests on the results of this court-martial. Hit it! Hey! A couple of guest stars in this one, as you might expect. First, you got African-Canadian actor Percy Rodriguez as Commodore Stone. A prolific television presence from the mid-50s through the 70s, Percy showed up in the Planet of the Apes series, Medical Center, Mission Impossible, and did 45 episodes of Peyton Place. He also voiced a lot of movie trailers, which I'm sure comes as no surprise once you hear the guy. Percy's got some pipes. Next, we got Joan Marshall as Ariel Shaw. She did 44 episodes of Bold Venture, whatever that is, but guest starred in such shows as Twilight Zone, I Spy, Gunsmoke, and Bonanza. Elisha Cook plays Cogley. Now this guy has 220 credits to his name from 1930 all the way to 1988 when he shot 13 episodes of Magnum P.I. Not all of them is the same character. The fact that he got hired this much is going to be a surprise in light of some later facts, but I don't want to get ahead of myself here. In what is probably Star Trek's weirdest casting, Richard Webb plays Records Officer Ben Finney. Another actor who was everywhere, this guy did it all. Westerns, science fiction, comedy, war pictures, a movie called Mule Feathers, and 44 episodes of and as Captain Midnight, sponsored by Ovaltine. Seriously, check it out.
Attention, members of the Secret Squadron. This is important. Keep yourself in top condition. Remember, to do your best, you've got to be at your best. Because someday you may be called upon
to pilot a jet plane across the continent, even to take the wheel and bring a great ship safely into port, to drive an ambulance to disaster areas. And when the time comes, you've got to be ready for it.
That's why I want all Secret Squadron members to drink Ovaltine every day, as I do.
See, you kids today don't even know. Those ads were unskippable, too. Anyways, let's jump into the plot. After coming through an ion storm that claimed the life of Records Officer Ben Finney, the Enterprise limps into Starbase 11 for repairs. Kirk beams down and, as his procedure, gives his sworn statement to Base Commander Commodore Stone about the circumstances surrounding Finney's death. Basically, the story goes they entered the storm, and Finney was directed to enter the ion sensor pod to do some science stuff with the storm. But as the storm intensified, Kirk ordered the ship to yellow alert and told Finney he may have to bail pretty soon. As it got worse, he upped it to red alert and told Finney to evacuate the pod as he was going to have to eject the pod to prevent damage to the ship. He waited until the last second, but Finney failed to evacuate the pod before it was ejected and he was lost. Spock arrives with the Enterprise's computer records of the event, and while Commodore Stone is queuing up the tape, Finney's 25-year-old teenage kid Jamie comes in and freaks out on Kirk, calling him a murderer and all this, and breaks down sobbing. Understandable, it's always hard on a young lady when her father gets squirted out of the side of a starship in an ion storm. You know how that goes. So anyways, Stone tells Spock to take the kid out of the room and then tells Kirk that the record shows that Kirk ejected the pod before declaring a red alert, and he's confined to the base while an investigation is conducted to see if they're going to need to do a court-martial. Well, as they say, word travels fast on a starbase, and when Kirk and McCoy head down to the M11 Starbase Club, you can almost hear the record scratch sound as everybody turns and gives the stink eye to Kirk. One of the guys from his graduating class tells him, "Hey, way to go murdering that guy." Kirk goes, "Yeesh, tough room," and leaves. And just as he leaves, Ariel Shaw arrives. McCoy immediately makes the connection, hot chick must be looking for Kirk. He is, of course, right, and he awkwardly tells her that all of his friends are ugly. Okay. Want to get a drink? Cut to Stone's office where Kirk is being deposed. He's talking about his relationship with Finney, how Finney was a teacher at the academy when Kirk was a midshipman. Also, they were very close, so much so that Finney's daughter, Jamie, is named after him. But while they were both serving on the Republic, Finney left a circuit open to the yada yada yada, and Kirk reported the error. Another 5 minutes and it would have blown up their ship, so, it was kind of important. Finney drew a reprimand for it and got sent to the bottom of the promotion list. Kirk says that Finney blames this incident for the whole crappiness issue with regards to his career. We get to hear the Ion Storm story another time, and Kirk insists he did everything right, only ejecting the pod after the red alert had been called and Finney had enough time to bail out. Stone explains that the video of the incident recorded by the Enterprise computer shows Kirk pushing the jettison pod button before the red alert was called. Kirk can't explain it. He knows that ain't how it happened, but the computer is never wrong, so... Stone says this looks really bad. Maybe you're too stressed or something. You're a good guy, so I tell you what. You spend the rest of your career behind a desk and we can forget this whole thing ever happened. What do you say? Kirk says, oh hell no, I will see you in court, Marshal. After the commercials, Kirk heads back to the club and meets up with Ariel Shaw, saying McCoy had told him that she was here, and also says he tried to compliment her by saying all of his friends were ugly, so sorry about that. We find out that Kirk and Shaw have been friendly in the past. She says you're in trouble. You're gonna need a lawyer. I can't do it because I'm busy that day, but I got a guy who's perfect for the job. I already hired him for you. He's probably already broken into your quarters with a metric ton of books. Now, the prosecution is probably going to hit this from a Kirk versus the computer angle, and this guy is a great choice to handle that. Oh, also, I know this because I'm the prosecution, and as such...
I must break you.
Also, all of this is a massive breach of ethics. Okay, bye. Kirk goes to his quarters and finds that there is, in fact, a lawyer in there with a buttload of books, saying they're way better than computers. Probably doesn't have a TV either. He's one of those guys. Kirk's not too sure about this guy. After all, he's the attorney that the prosecution chose for him. Nothing hinky about that. But before Kirk can wonder how the hell he got all these books into Kirk's quarters without a wheelbarrow or something, it's too late! Court-martial time! Computer reads the charges. Kirk enters a plea of not guilty. First on the stand is Spock. He testifies that he knows all about computers. He knows all about Kirk. Computers don't lie, but it's also impossible that Kirk did what the computer says he did. Shaw says that's your opinion. Spock says I'm a Vulcan. Well, he says I'm a Vulcanian, but as such, my opinions are awesome. She says they're still opinions. Cogley chooses not to cross. The Enterprise Personnel Officer is next. She retells the whole Kirk and Finney on the Republic thing in case you were up getting a beer the last time. Cogley again chooses not to cross. McCoy's up next. Shaw says he's an expert on space madness. He's all, I've heard of it. She asks if it's possible that if Finney hated Kirk, that Kirk hated him back. McCoy's like, Kirk don't do that kind of thing. And Shaw says, okay, but is it possible? McCoy says, I guess. She says, thanks. Cogley once again chooses not to cross. At this point, even Judge Stone has to call him out on this. He says, well, I'm just waiting for the prosecution to rest so I can call my own witnesses. The judge says, well, they haven't rested, so you'll need to wait. Screw that, I call Captain Kirk to the stand. The judge says, wait, you can't. So Captain Kirk, Cogley says, tell us again about this whole pod business. So for the third time this episode, Kirk tells the story about the friggin' pod. Yellow alert, red alert, squirted a guy out of the side of the ship in that order. Ariel Shaw cross-examines Kirk and shows him the video showing that the red alert part of that story didn't happen until after the guy got squirted out. It zooms in to the more than clearly labeled 3 buttons on the arm of the captain's chair, and we see Kirk clearly hit the yellow alert button and then hit the jettison pod button without having hit the red alert button. Kirk cleverly uses the nuh-uh defense and we go to commercial. When we return, Kirk's back in his quarters with Fogley Legley over here, who, in light of the computer evidence that for some reason he didn't seem to even know about until it was shown in court, has basically turned into Hudson from Aliens. That's it, you're screwed, game over, they got the computer tapes, maybe they'll let you be a janitor or something. Spock calls Kirk and says he ran some tests on the computer and it looks fine. Kirk says, well, you tried, maybe you can beat your next captain at chess. This triggers something in Spock, and he runs off to go check something. Then, Ben Finney's 37-year-old, 10-year-old daughter comes in and apparently has done a complete 180 and wants Cogley to let Kirk plea out because she don't want him to destroy himself over all of this. She says she read some old letters her dad wrote where he talked about how close they were, and she realized something. Not sure what, but she's back on Team Kirk. Well, up on the Enterprise, we see Spock playing the computer in chess. McCoy busts in talking about Jim's on trial with his career on the line and you're in here trying to get a STEAM achievement or something. Spock is like, yeah, I'm playing chess and I've beaten the computer 5 times in a row. McCoy says, what? Spock says he programmed the computer for chess a couple of months ago and put all of his knowledge of the game in there. Computers are infallible, so best case scenario, he should get a stalemate, but he's kicking its ass now. McCoy says we got to get to the courtroom and tell the judge about this. Well, they get there right after the defense rests. Lots of whispers that apparently don't bother the prosecution or the judge, and then Cogley says he wants to Control-Z that whole resting thing and reconvene aboard the Enterprise. Shaw finally objects to this, and Cogley gives a speech about how we can't let the machine be more important than the guy, and if you don't let me move the whole friggin' trial to a different location, then you're saying you like being subjugated by computers and all this, and after the commercial, we're on the Enterprise in a briefing room where, you guessed it, Spock tells the story about the whole chess thing again. He says that if the computer is now suddenly unable to beat him in chess, it must have been tampered with. And the only people who could do that are Kirk, Spock, and, surprise, surprise, Records Officer Ben Finney. Cogley then asks Kirk what they did to try to find Finney after he got squirted out of the ship. He says we did a thorough search pattern of the area and also searched the ship in case he made it out of the pod but was knocked out of something and couldn't respond. Cogley says, okay, but what if he didn't want to be found? Could you find a guy that didn't want to be found? Kirk goes, holy crap, I didn't even think of that. Cogley then goes, Finney ain't dead. Jump cut to the bridge where the judge panel is all sitting in their chairs, and as though we haven't changed scenes at all, the judge goes, what do you mean? Cogley goes, hang loose, Kirk's got to do a thing. Kirk says they're going to do an experiment, but everybody has to beam off of the ship to the planet first, which apparently takes all of 12 seconds. Cogley says he's got an errand to run, so he's out too. The court seems unaffected by the defense counsel just hauling ass like that. Well, they also turn the ship's engines off so they won't make noise, and then Spock puts some dubstep on the stereo. Turns out that's all of the heartbeats on the ship, which should only include the people on the bridge now that everybody else is beamed down. McCoy uses a white sound device to isolate each person's heartbeat and eliminate it from the sound they're listening to. After he's removed everybody on the bridge's heartbeat, there's still one left. It's Finney! Possibly. Spock says it's coming from engineering, and Kirk grabs a phaser and heads down there. Any pretense that this is still a court-martial is out the window like a disgruntled records officer. Kirk finds Finney in engineering, clearly bad cookies, and he does some monologuing where he mentions not only that, he's bitter about the Republic thing, but also that he's sabotaged the ship so the engines can't be turned back on and the Enterprise will crash into the planet. And then 2 completely different people have a fight. Well, off camera, Cogley apparently has brought Jamie Finney up to the ship, and Kirk tells Finney that she's there, and do you want to let your 47-year-old infant daughter die too? Finney gives in and tells Kirk what he did to sabotage the ship. Kirk runs to a Jeffries tube, fixes the problem, and on the bridge, Uhura and Lieutenant Who Gives a Rat's Ass manage to get the ship back into a stable orbit. Judge Stone dismisses the case. In the epilogue, Shaw visits Kirk on the bridge and gives him a gift from Cogley. A book. Which book? Who knows? She says, think anyone would mind if we kissed? The rest of the bridge thinks to themselves, yes, of course we mind. Despite standing next to an elevator they could take to Kirk's quarters, they kiss on the bridge. She leaves. Kirk says to Spock and McCoy she's a really good lawyer. Spock says she's clearly good at digging into your briefs. McCoy says he'd like to habeas her corpus. Everybody stares awkwardly forward, and we roll credits. Great stuff. So, spoiler alert, I'm sorry if this is one of your favorites, but this ain't a very good episode. But there are a couple of good lines in there.
Mr. Spock, you're the most cold-blooded man I've ever known.
Why, thank you, Doctor.
Gotta have a good Spock-McCoy exchange, and this one is fun. The whole McCoy thinks he's insulting Spock, but Spock takes it as a compliment thing is kind of a running gag in this show. But as running gags go, it's a good one.
That's the way we do it now. Sweep it under the rug, and me along with it. Not in your life. I intend to fight.
Then you draw a general court.
Draw it, I demand it. And right now, Commodore Stone, right now.
It's pretty melodramatic by today's standards, but I still like it. Sort of this episode's "you can't handle the truth" line. But it's also good to see that Kirk knows exactly what happened and has utter confidence that truth, and through that truth, justice will prevail. He's not wrong, but it turns out not to be a simple matter. More on that later.
What's the matter? Don't you like books?
Oh, I like them fine. But a computer takes less space.
A computer, huh? I got one of these in my office. Contains all the precedents. A synthesis of all the great legal decisions written throughout time. I never use it.
Why not?
I've got my own system. Books, young man. Books, thousands of them.
Cogley is a fun character, an utter Luddite curmudgeon in a world of technology and computerization, and Cook plays him beautifully. We've heard this anti-tech rhetoric a couple of times before in this, a show ostensibly about humanity's bright future, and it won't be the last either. That's another thing we'll talk about later. I do like that the Enterprise footage of the incident is really from just one camera's angle, like you would expect it to be. A lot of times TV shows and movies show what's supposed to be security camera footage, but it's actually multi-angle, edited together footage shot like a movie. Ironically, Star Trek III does exactly this later on. But here it's all from a spot on the bridge that seems like where a camera would be. The close-up on the chair is a little weird, but yeah, there could be a camera back there too. It was also cool to see Uhura coming up to the navigator position when they're trying to get the ship back into orbit. It's really great when they expand her expertise and show her to be capable in multiple areas. While we're on that subject, huge kudos to Star Trek for having a black actor portray Starbase Commander Commodore Stone. In 1967, this was a very big deal. Actor Percy Rodriguez continued to break ground in 1968 when he portrayed neurosurgeon Dr. Harry Miles in a recurring role on Peyton Place. I love seeing Star Trek playing an active role in promoting inclusion and representation. You know, great stuff. The Goof. Oy, lots of goof in this one. Where to start? First, let's talk about the script itself. Now, you should know that this script would have been less mangled if it got sucked backwards through a French milking machine, as my uncle used to say. It started with Don Mankiewicz, who was no slouch. He's the kid of Herman Mankiewicz, who co-wrote Citizen Kane with Orson Welles, and Don himself was nominated for an Oscar before he took this job. Well then, Star Trek story consultant Stephen Karabatsos did some extensive rewrites, and then, after it was shot, the scenes got rearranged in the editing process, ostensibly to help with pacing, and some other scenes that would have explained things like Jamie's sudden change of heart, and a scene where Jamie confronts her father in the engine room, so he didn't have to have that weird Kirk voiceover to explain stuff, got cut out entirely. But that ain't all the problems with this script. For instance, Cogley's whole shtick is he don't trust computers. He's got to have the books. Computers should never take precedence over humans, this guy says. But as soon as he sees the computer evidence against Kirk, this guy collapses like a souffle in a rainstorm. In fact, nobody, not Kirk, not Kirk's attorney, not notable and vocal Luddite himself McCoy, not even Spock, even considers that the computer may have been tampered with until Spock gets the idea to play chess with the computer way too late in this process. There are so many holes in this thing. But moving on, let's talk about props. Watch McCoy working with this thing and look at the looks on the actors' faces. Nobody, least of all DeForest Kelley, is buying this thing that looks like a Mr. Microphone with some crap glued to it. I have no idea why they even attempted this. Right after the interminable slog of watching McCoy pantomime taking heartbeat readings from each and every stinking person on that bridge, they have to also remove the operator down in the transporter room who didn't beam down with everybody else. So Spock just hits a button on his computer to do that. Well, why couldn't he just do that for the rest of them? Part of the reason you would include a future gadget like this is that it looks cool. Makes people go, ooh, neat. But everybody's already seen a friggin' microphone before. I mean, tricorders would be silly if they just look like toasters everybody's already got in their kitchen. If the microphone is all they could come up with, then scrap it and just have Spock hit the button, you know? And while we're on the bridge, let's take a look at the arm of Kirk's chair there. Now, You can't tell me they were thinking about a captain's chair's buttons being able to be routinely repurposed for some kind of mission-specific setup, not in 1967. So this episode posits that the buttons we've been seeing on Kirk's chair were for yellow alert, red alert, and jettison pod. And also they need comically easy-to-read labels on them. Leave aside the fact that we've heard Kirk calling for a yellow alert and a red alert before, and he didn't hit no button when he did that. There's another button that can squirt a guy out of the side of the ship to his death on the arm of a chair. Very close to where someone might put, say, their elbow. I'd hate to think that I got squirted into space because the captain put his coffee down in the wrong spot, you know? Seems like there should at least be an "Are you sure?" dialogue that pops up on the screen or something. Seems like Starfleet OSHA was caught napping on this one. So, question for you. Who the hell are these two? Director Mark Daniels was notorious for being overly cautious with his actors, not letting them do stunts at all if he could help it. And there are some shots in here of Shatner and Dick Webb, but for the most part, you're looking at two people who don't look nothing like their actors. Without the stripes on their sleeves, it would be impossible to tell who was supposed to be who. I gotta point out, that's not Eddie Paskey. He's a body double, not a stunt double. That's actually stuntman Chuck Clow, and the other guy is Troy Melton. But they clearly ain't stunt doubles either, because they ain't doubling nobody. Look at that. While we're on the subject of Finney and what he does or does not look like, have you seen someone look more out of place in his costume? This was a weird casting choice. From his oddly pronounced 5 o'clock shadow, I mean, I get that he's been hiding, but he's been hiding for days, so if we're going to go that route, he should have like a beard or something. To his booming bass radio voice,
Hello, Captain.
I've never seen a more awkward casting choice. This guy looks like he's been sucked in from Mission Impossible or something and is trying desperately to get back. It's not a bad choice exactly. Webb's a fine actor for the time. It's just odd. I can't put my finger on it. But it's so odd I can't get past it. It kind of takes me out of the show entirely. Very weird. So this was the first episode where Gene Roddenberry used DeForest Research to check their scripts for accuracy or at the very least plausibility. No relation to our good doctor, by the way. Now, I don't know if they just missed this or they didn't miss it, Gene just didn't change the script or what happened. But you don't have to be friggin' Blaise Pascal to see the problem with this line right here.
Gentlemen, this computer has an auditory sensor. It can, in effect, hear sounds. By installing a booster, we can increase that capability on the order of 1 to the 4th power.
In case you're not mathematically inclined, 1 to the 4th power would be, let's see, double that, carry the 9, divide by Avogadro's thing. 1! It's 1. 1 to any power is 1. The computer amplifies sounds until they're as loud as they already were? What? This is science fiction. You should at least get the math right. And finally, what is with this whole thing about Finney's kid being named after Kirk? Finney looks like he's at least 50 years old, and Webb was 50 when he filmed this. Jamie looks, all jokes aside, to be in her mid-20s, but is wearing a Sailor Moon costume in a clear attempt to present her as being in her mid-teens or something. And then you got Kirk, who, regardless of the fact that if you did the Conscience of the King math would have to be over 40, is clearly presented as being in his mid-30s, as Shatner himself is. Finney was teaching at the academy when he met Kirk as a midshipman, so let's say Finney taught new cadet orientation or something and met Kirk at the earliest possible point, as a freshman at 18. If Kirk is 35, that was only 17 years ago. That makes Finney 33 when they met. So that makes Jamie as old as 17 if and only if 33-year-old Finney immediately befriended an 18-year-old Kirk to the level that he's willing and eager to name his child after him. A child, by the way, that would have to be like a biscuit away from being born at that point, and good luck explaining to your wife or partner why your plan to name her after a grandmother is getting scrapped, and instead she's going to be named for some kid he just met. That's going to be a very weird conversation. I think they really should have sat down and worked this out, because it don't make sense. Or just take out the part where she's named after Kirk and think of some other way to demonstrate the Kirk-Finney relationship. And speaking of her mother, where is she? Why is Jamie just running around on the starbase by herself? What the heck is going on? There's so much other stuff wrong with this episode that it would make this video over an hour to put it all in. But let me know what some of the stuff you guys saw that was goofy in this one down in the comments down there. Let's see if we can get 1,000 comments. There's plenty of material. Ruminations. So a couple of production notes on this one. Since we do these in production order, next week's episode is the menagerie, mainly because they wanted to get a twofer out of the whole courtroom set before they struck it. We'll see some stuff from it, like the chair with the palm scanner thing in other later episodes too. Also, this is the first episode where we see the dress uniforms, and the only episode in which a female dress uniform is shown, which is a shame because it looks pretty good. Shaw's has the Starfleet Command badge on it, whereas the male version don't seem to use badges, and either she's had a lackluster military career or there's no place for ribbons on there. But overall, it's a pretty good looking uniform. Shame we never saw it again. So about Elisha Cook and why it's surprising he got hired so much. Apparently, this guy just could not remember his lines, and most of the footage of him saying lines was shot one line at a time. That grimness on everybody's faces during the courtroom scenes wasn't entirely the actors being in the scene. You're probably looking at like take 35 or something. Sadly, William Shatner was also going through an emotionally devastating divorce from his wife Gloria during the filming of this episode. A substantial chunk of the problem between those two was his shooting schedule on Star Trek. Kudos to him for soldiering on, and the subject matter of the episode allows his understandable troubled and melancholy demeanor to add to his betrayal, but that had to be rough on a guy. He was reportedly on the verge of tears pretty much the whole shoot, needing makeup to dab his eyes after almost every take some days. So if you felt like Shatner's performance was a little low-key in this episode, that's what was up with that. So we talked about the crazy script, but believe me, what we got was better than what it started out as. The original story had the Enterprise computer evolve a personality, and since Ben Finney, as Records Officer, interacted with the computer so much, it fell in love with him. Then, knowing that Kirk reported Finney on the Republic and how bitter Finney was about that, the computer comes to hate the captain, and it decides to lie about the circumstances of Finney's supposed death to get back at him. In that version, Finney did get squirted out of the ship and the pod crashed on an asteroid where Finney is found alive later during the climax of the story. Gene's main problem with this version was that he didn't want anything to come between Kirk and the Enterprise. If the ship's going to fall in love with somebody, it's going to be Kirk. Which is a concept that actually does come back in a later episode. So as bad as it was, it could have been so much worse. There's not much of a message here. They make a big deal out of the man over machine thing, which I'm sure was on the mind of a lot of workers at the time, with some automation starting to be talked about in various industries. But they kind of hamstring that message by showing that the computer was only faulty because some human got in there and screwed it up on purpose. All in all, they handle this message much more effectively in later episode The Ultimate Computer. I would have liked to have seen a version of something like the Kane Mutiny in Star Trek, but they tried to do too much with it. Having the captain falsely accused of incompetence and having to defend himself isn't a bad concept for a Star Trek story, and the characters of Shaw and Cogley are really well done and likable. There's good stuff here, to be sure, but honestly, it would have been a big help for the script to go through a couple of more rewrites. As many as it went through, clearly, it wasn't enough. So there you have it, Court Martial. I gotta know what you guys think of this thing down in the comments. And don't forget to hit that like button, so as I know you dug it, and so that the YouTube knows you dug it, and will suggest it to people like yourself. Really helps the channel out. If you'd like to support the channel monetarily, channel memberships get you early access to my commentary tracks for Babylon 5 and The Expanse. Having a lot of fun over there watching these shows with the channel members. Plus, anything else I come up with will get published there first. So if you're into that, or if you just want to support the show so I can keep making them and all that, hit that join button. If you're more of a single serving kind of person, hit that thanks button and throw a few quatloos in the tip jar so I can get a slice over at Lombardi's or something. And don't forget, we got your Possum merchandise over at adstudiosmerch.com. Coffee mugs, t-shirts, magnets, phone cases, you name it. You'll look amazingly cool and be helping the channel out at the same time. It's a win-win. Next episode, we head back to the courtroom, this time with Spock in the chair. He's got some explaining to do, and he does so by telling a tale of when he was serving under his previous captain, Christopher Pike. Join us next time for The Menagerie. Until then, possum friends are awesome friends. Take it easy, all right? Later.